This can be very agitating and difficult. I watched a really incredible documentary last night called Predator. Because we kind of, if I may be so bold to make an observation about people and tendencies, excuse me, I need to go empty my bowels.
Xích vô. Thôi lấy hàng giấy cho anh. Lấy hàng giấy em không?
Hello? Yeah, so like I was saying, I uh, I watched a documentary last night, and this was a documentary called Predator. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the Chris Hansen uh, Dateline to Catch a Predator about catching American pedophiles attempting to prey on children. Sure, has anyone here seen that? Most people here, I would, I would, I would guess that most people here have seen that. So the documentary was basically created by this guy who was abused as a child. And when he came across this series, To Catch a Predator, Dateline NBC, To Catch a Predator, he was so curious about this question, why and how, how could somebody do this to another human being? And, a child, but a human being. And the documentary was, surprisingly actually coming from someone who'd been victimized, attempting to humanize these predators, and to bring up this idea of what is it to be a predator? What is it to prey on others? What is it to get satisfaction out of someone else's suffering? And how this show, To Catch a Predator, was actually an example of this kind of collective interest in watching someone's life fall apart, basically seeing someone's death. And the end of the documentary was basically interviewing Chris Hansen himself, who kind of started this trend of this kind of content. And he was filmed and kind of questioned in the way that the predators were questioned, and saying, you know, what responsibility do you take for ruining these people's lives? And there was one particular case with an 18-year-old in high school, and he was going to meet a 15-year-old boy who's a gay, so someone else in high school. And they published that episode, and kind of destroyed his whole life. So what I mean to say is that why may not be the right question. Why is someone else doing something? But more like how we can ask ourselves, or look at ourselves deeply with a lot of sensitivity, and say, why are we doing what we're doing? And maybe even more importantly, what are we doing? Not just getting trapped and stuck in these surface level interpretations of what's going on and who we are, like punish the criminal. Punish the criminal is an extension of lynch the black man. And I guess one of the things that this, I think he was called like a moralothopist, but he like studies the morality of human beings. And saying something along these lines of, maybe it's not that I'm more moral than anyone else, but maybe a little bit more sensitive to what's going on. Seeing that and watching that. And I think that a real intention of this channel and this community is to become a lot more sensitive about what's going on, a lot more sensitive about what we're doing. And how they were in this show, this Dateline to Catch a Predator, and they're profiting on human misery. They're preying on these disastrous situations that are, of course, a representation of this underbelly of our society. And they're not really asking why even that person is doing it, let alone asking why this is such a big problem. Why in American morality there's so much leeway for preying on others, exploiting others. And I think a big part of that is, of course, the sexualization of children in Western media. I was talking with someone here in Vietnam, and they were saying how, even 15 to 18, sexuality is not a big part of young people's lives. Whereas, of course, we know in America, it's very normal to be in high school, and, younger and younger kids are getting sexualized inversely and outversely, right? And one of the big ideas of childism, this kind of fundamental, the ism or the prejudice systems, like against women or against people of color, and all of the violence that comes out of that, is that it's not just that people just go and do whatever. There's a thought process behind what people do. And so people need justifications to do certain things to certain people. So in the past, we had to justify, lynching black men and celebrating it. We had to justify, wives not being able to give consent or women not being able to vote. We have to, violence against children, violence against women, violence against, these different groups of people. It has to be justified. And it's oftentimes justified through these prejudgments that these beings, these people are in some way less human than you are or that I am, because who would want to victimize themselves? But it's difficult to get out of the world of like buzzwords and social media and just this kind of very insensitive way of consuming whatever is put in front of our face. So, what the work that we're doing here at the Monk Life Meditation Institute is actually a process of resensitizing. And that's a very difficult process, let me tell you. But I'm doing better. I'm doing better. I've noticed just coming back to a place that I haven't been to in some time and just kind of comparing and contrasting the mind that was here previously, the mind that's here now. I'm a little bit of a softie, so I'm not putting myself into too much intensive, difficult situations, but I can see there's a little bit more softness, a little bit more um, appreciation for the small things that I didn't really have before. Or that before, that appreciation for the small things and the small moments was a little bit obscured. Well, it'll take a long time. It'll take a long time, and it's also something very, uh, very contemplative and very new. It's not meant to be something, you know, traditionalist. Something that has a little bit more depth than that. And it's very difficult because we're kind of programmed by social media and the algorithms to be looking for something that's easily digested in a very short period of time. And this is exactly the opposite of that. And we maybe have this ideal that, well, I should be able to digest whatever I come across in a very short period of time, but that's just an ideal. It doesn't actually relate to the human experience, kind of like going and digging a well in Africa or in India. Sure, it's a good thing to do. It can be a great thing to do, but there's more structural issues that we need to develop ourselves structurally to then be able to go into those environments and really see what's needed. So, from the Buddhist perspective, we'd say that one of the best offerings that you can give to someone is to give them the offering of the emphasis on freedom or the emphasis on detachment that's not about getting something or avoiding something. And our words won't mean much. Um, our words hold weight or relevance according to our practical involvement and engagement. So imagine going to the simplest situation possible, like player 5. Imagine you going to a group of people who are digging a hole, and you give some commentary about, how will you choose the next pile of dirt to dig out? Just go fuck yourself. Just go and mind your own business. Or shut your fucking mouth and dig. Or listen closely. And give. And this is a kind of a line that does need to be drawn and does need to be offered for people because of how disassociated we are from human connection that's not based on lust or seeking profit or consuming media. So a little bit tough to receive, but it's very important to not act like that. Because you don't just diminish your own capacity to be involved, you also diminish other people's involvement. So like you go up to a hole and then you put your big fat belly out and you say, ha ha ha, how are you going to dig this hole? Just go fuck yourself. Get the fuck away from here. Nobody cares about your big fat dumb belly full of shit that you've been eating. And this is a part of the kind of social activism work and the kind of mini protests or protests of mind that I'm involved with and the Monk Life Meditation Institute is involved with here. And I think we need to work and build in a way where we see the problematic nature of our disgust in others, but we're also willing to set boundaries for what makes sense for us now, especially when other people are approaching us or other people are coming into our spaces while still being available, still ultimately being available. Because I think about that when it comes to people who may approach me and say, man, just teach meditation, just do some course or just teach traditional Buddhism. Okay, that's a good idea, but what I am doing here with these boundaries or barriers that are being set up, that's just standard. It's like trying to turn all of Buddhism or Buddhist monasticism or all meditation centers into some kind of flaccid, easily consumable thing that you can just show up and somebody's going to sit there and talk to you like you're the king of the world. And that's very problematic in a lot of ways. And I don't have the resources to do that. Doesn't mean that those people aren't welcome, but just that right now I'm more of in a position to, tell them you're very welcome here, but shut your fucking mouth and listen. And, please consider to donate and support in some way if you can. Whether with your time, your energy, your resources, your interest to collaborate, to serve, to volunteer, to be supported. But just like coming into someone else's environment and judging what they're doing, it's just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Yeah. Our expectations are oftentimes built on misconceptions and beliefs that aren't kind of built on direct experience or any kind of like close looking. And I think that unconsciously, subconsciously, subliminally, in a subtle way, we feel disrespected as a people, as a society, as a world of human beings. I think that there's this overarching sense, more so in the West, but just generally, of being disrespected. And it leads us to look for opportunities to look down on others or to disrespect others. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, we're in a post-scarcity society. We've been in a post-scarcity society for a long, long time. And previously, that was, we allowed kind of kings and queens and things like that and slavery. Now we don't really allow that, but we allow millionaires and billionaires and private corporations, etc. Yeah, thanks for your input, Luke. But I would invite you to maybe look at your lack of involvement in what's going on here and your lack of understanding about Buddhism and meditation to maybe orient you a little bit more realistically in terms of your, like your position or your relevance of your thoughts and your opinions. And I know we don't like to be challenged in this way, but this is challenging. I don't know your involvement level, Luke. I'm just assuming that. But you can see that I have a good microphone at least to do my live streaming. Yeah, the unwilling acceptance of authorities, right? That's probably a big part of what goes on in this live streaming and in this environment. Is I'm quite an authority, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense for me to be live streaming in this way. This level of accessibility probably doesn't make a lot of sense. but I have the support of my teacher and my sangha to continue doing this, this work and this teaching and this sharing. Because there's people, I can't, of course, speak to their wisdom or, their level of deep meditation, but there's people who are way less experienced than me in terms of Buddhist community practice and studying with masters and probably attending retreats and stuff like that, that are running multi-million-dollar meditation centers, where if you even wanted to go there, you'd have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars. So I'm just sitting here and sharing and, available and very vulnerable a lot of the time. Well, sometimes I do fall into judgmental thoughts or comments, but it's always an invitation for me, from me to them, kind of a challenge, an invitation. If you want to be rude, I know how to be rude too. If you know how to be disrespectful, I know how to be disrespectful too. But this isn't really about being rude or disrespectful. And that's also kind of one of the weird things about this institute or this community is what it's actually about is kind of crazy and kind of ridiculous, kind of out of this world. Not so much because of me, because the people who make up this community are more so about me than I am, just in terms of showing up here and sharing, and kind of like how a garden is more about the plants and the soil and the what's coming out of it than the gardener. The gardener is just like the facilitator or the caretaker for the space. And it's it will always be a very small group. It will always be a very small group of people who want to become monks or yogis or volunteers or have serious discussions about spirituality. But I try to do my best to make this an environment that's kind of environment for those curious onlookers and just general wanderers that are looking for something interesting. There's a lot here for that too, even if you're not interested in spirituality, but maybe just exploring human psychology. Well, each person is kind of a certain kind of people. So I don't mean to put everybody into a box. Everybody's, in their own box. And this teaching and this work and this exposing or opening is a matter of opening up that box and letting the light shine in. Because if we go around and try to create these narratives of there's this kind of people, there's that kind of people, we can miss out on actually the people themselves or the experience themselves. It's like you get so caught up in the idea of yourself that you don't experience yourself right now, which is mostly not thought based because we have a lot of attachment to our body. So everything that's like going along with the body is not based in thought. It doesn't rely on thought. So like who would you be? How could you say who you are if you couldn't see anymore or you couldn't hear anymore? Or you couldn't smell anymore, you couldn't feel anymore. You'd be a totally different person. And so none of those things are in any way based in thought forms. Yeah, that's a good way to say it, squeeze lift. I'm 32. That's great, squeeze lift. You're doing good. Yeah. Well, the real political situation is kind of inside of yourself. So, like, there's a political situation going on here at this coffee shop, and that political situation will drastically change depending on your actions and your way. Now, it doesn't seem that way, but if you were in a state of extreme peace, that will affect the environment. Just like if you were in a state of extreme anger, that will affect the environment. So if you see it that way, you can kind of be very politically active, but not relying on mainstream news or governments and things to do that. That's a lot more realistic and practical, more workable than trying to kind of, because modern politics is basically like a fantasy TV show or a movie or a story from like a book that you'd read. So you can't really engage with that very much. Like, what are you going to do about Donald Trump arresting the president of Venezuela? There's nothing for you to do about that, even if you live in Washington, D.C. For the large majority of people, there's not really anything to do about that. Well, we learn in meditation to bring the mind to the body, But it's not like we're becoming more attached to the body or more identified with the body, but just becoming more aware of how much the body has to do with what we're experiencing outwardly. And so instead of following your thoughts in that chaotic environment, you can follow your breathing in any environment. And then you reorient away from the thought forms of other people to the direct experience of your being or your breathing. And I'm a big advocate for renunciation and leaving and letting go. When you're ready, when that makes sense, if you have the good conditions to do that. A lot of people end their own lives because they don't have this principle or this understanding of renunciation. Even if you have a bunch of $1 million homes, if you're suffering and that is the context or the container of where all that suffering is taking place, let all that go, leave it, leave it. And that's not just in terms of the body, but also in terms of the mind. So sometimes we need help in terms of the mind to see that physical renunciation in the mind, the reality of that renunciation. Like, for example, renouncing your family, renouncing the past, renouncing the future now. And we can really do that. Experientially, we can do that. We say, well, yeah, but it's still there. Yeah, but it's also not there at all. Just as much as it is there in a real way, it's totally not there at all in a very real way. The past, the future. Where it's real is when we have this constant need to identify with and believe in our own thoughts. But if you can drop that, then thoughts are like irrelevant to your being or to your way, your wayfaring. Like if you were on a boat and you were rowing by, the movements of the water are there, but they're irrelevant to your rowing and your movement and your going forward. And then once we can get some experience with that, we can see, the kind of more non-dual perspective or the thoughtless perspective of no boat, no body, no mind, the fiction of self. And it's really helpful to know that and to know about the reality of that. The potential to realize that is really important to know about. And I try to be a living example of that. I had a friend who reached out to me who I've known for quite a few years. They were a monk when I was a monk. I'm not a monk anymore. They sent me a message on WhatsApp and they said, Rob, you need to come back to America and get some psychiatric care. You're really losing your mind. You're really going crazy. And that is that own person's ignorance and delusion. And people who come across my live streams and the things that I do, if they're receptive enough, if they're open enough, they'll see that they cannot rely on their perceptions. Doesn't mean I'm faultless. Doesn't mean that I'm without fault. I'm not saying that. When I was watching that documentary Predator, I was actually looking at myself and saying, how am I making a show out of other human beings' ignorance and attachment? And how can I make sure to not do that when I'm trying to do this work and reach people and create this space and this environment? Because it's like if someone had seen my live streams and had this idea that I was very crazy and I needed help and I needed some kind of medicine, psychiatric medicine, and then they were sitting down across from me right now and they couldn't let go of that thought, even though they experienced those things, even though they believed those things, it would be so completely clear that that has no truth in the face of this. You can do that in terms of like ultimate truth, but also just in terms of face to face, mind to mind. Like This is it. There's nothing crazy. There's nothing behind the scenes here that I'm, you know, this is it. So, and then you get to the point, and that's why I do get a little bit frustrated, because if that person or someone in that role can't let that go, then now they need to make other people believe what they believe to, to do something about this. But what is this? It's just this. This is just this. And this is the kind of enlightenment experiences that have really structured my life and continue to structure my life as I navigate in the world and try to help myself and try to be more helpful to others as well. Just because you have to manage your life in this way or that way, it doesn't make this any less thus just this, or any less thus. So. And it's really true. I mean, it's really true, because even this is a friend of mine who was a monk. They've done meditation retreats. They knew me, they've known me. I've lived in the same room with them together as a monk. And I saw their message from them this morning. They sent me a voice message and they were like, Rob, I don't know what's going on, but man, you can get help. You can come back to the US and you can get a psychiatrist, or someone's going to be able to help you. And, I received what he said. I heard what he said. I'm glad that, he was kind of mentally stable in some way in him saying that. But for me, this is totally undeniable. And the only thing that could be brought up is, well, what if you were drowning? Would you still be peaceful? Probably not. But I'm not drowning. There's just this. And this can be inclusive of anything and everything, and it is. Hey, Michael, I'm in Vietnam, not in Bali. I was in Indonesia before I came to Vietnam. And I'm hoping to buy some property here in Vietnam, to get some land, build a small meditation center, something along those lines. But that will be, the next step. Right now, just settling into being here in Vietnam and doing my work and taking care of myself. Because all these ideas of success seem to come up. Like, okay, I'm going to pay off my house. I'm going to get land and build a meditation center. I'm going to live there. It's going to be really nice. And and whoa, now is really nice, and I'm going to keep riding this wave and living this way. All those ideas can kind of remove me from the fullness of this experience right now. And that's what I'm seeking anyway. I mean, that's why I'm seeking some land nearby a mountain, or being by the ocean, or being in a quiet kind of very safe space. And this has always been a big mission for me, is cultivating and creating these safe spaces. And that means a deep intentionality that's not conflict oriented and built around a willingness to step back and surrender. But if you have people coming into your home that are not willing to step back and surrender, you might have to cut them up into little pieces and cook them into a stew. Or you might have to leave. You might have to run. And this access to insight, or access to like the fullness of this experience now, that's not based on thoughts about my life, is what gives that freedom to cut through, or to lift something up or put something down. Like, this is okay, this is not okay. But most of the time, I don't want to be deciding this is okay, this is not okay. I just want to be dwelling, in awareness, or in an appreciation of the fullness of the way that this already is. And that's what I'm seeking anyway. So why not get it now? And if I don't practice to get it now, or receive it now, or offer it now to myself and to everything, then when the hell am I going to get it? So it oftentimes subconsciously or automatically seems like a good idea to like know who someone else is. But that's not really how relationships with other people work. It's more the role that that person has in your life. So rather than assuming up this created identity of who someone else is and then talking to that person, you might want to check inside and see, what is this person's relationship? What is their role to me in my life? Like, what would the world be without mechanics and carpenters, fathers and mothers? It's not a great mother is more of a mother than she is herself. A great father is more of a father than he is himself. A great carpenter, a master carpenter, is more of a carpenter than he is himself. And that just goes to Jesus, right? Jesus's identity is not very much about himself. We have very few actual writings of Jesus. Like the words of Jesus, there are very few. The identity of Jesus is based in his role as being the Son of God. So people will oftentimes have a lot of confusion when it comes to me, because they're assuming up or creating up this identity of me that doesn't actually have any correlation to who I am. And then they're talking to that like disjointed idea of me from a disassociated place, rather than questioning in themselves, what role does this person have to me, in relationship to me being with them or listening to them, etc. You can save a lot of energy by seeing it that way, or questioning in that way. And in that way, me and Squeeze Lift can be in quite an intimate relationship, without me having to read Squeeze Lift's diary, and without Squeeze Lift having to monitor me from a drone when I'm not live streaming. and kind of going into the toilet and looking through my, it's about not a good analogy, but you know what I mean. Or you don't, and that's okay too. It's name shapes. It's primarily psychosis because of our identification with thought forms. So the mind, the subtlety of the mind that can be receptive to the minds of others it doesn't depend on thought forms. Thought forms depend on that subtle movements of mind. So when those subtle movements of mind are like noticed or tuned into, and then they're co-opted by or like controlled by thought forms, that's psychosis. But if you're just feeling and noticing that movement of energy, that's more like a subtlety of awareness. And then as you go further and further in a purification process, if that's what you wanted to do, then you can get into kind of you know, things like that. But they're only relevant, should only be relevant in terms of helping others, you know? And I feel that a big part of my work is to help people pursue their interests on their own. Because I think about, okay, let me take some time. I'm going to make a website, kind of buy a suit or buy some nice clothes, maybe lose some weight, get a little bit more physically fit, and then take on this identity of a bro coach or a life coach and, sell courses to people and mentoring programs to people. But there's a lot of people that are already doing that. And my work is more to turn people's interests back onto their own intentions, and then they can do with that what they want. Because I'm not very fixated on becoming very financially independent or wealthy, even though I think that I can do a lot of good. There was someone on a recent live stream who pulled my leg a little bit. They were sending some donations to a friend of mine who was also live streaming, and they were like, Dr. Rob has really impacted my life, and my father just died from something, and I got this big inheritance, and I want to invest in you and support you. So I was like, uh-oh, someone's going to send me a bunch of money. How am I going to manage this? And it's confusing when we get caught up in like the personal ideals, the personal ideas of ourself, and then the personal ideas of other people, because we don't know our other people's personal ideas, and we really don't even know that much about our own personal ideas. If you wanted to write down why you do what you do, you'd probably have to write a long book that was much longer than the Bible. So who's writing that book? And even if that book was written, big book, very, very big, first of all, who's going to read it? Probably nobody. You're probably not going to read it. But then something changes, something shifts. A new person comes in your life, or a new perspective comes in your life, or someone goes out of your life, or something old that you held on to kind of gets released. So now you've got to write an entirely new book. And I'm not much of a writer or a thinker. I'm more of a giver, more of a blesser. And I'm lucky to have people that, care about me enough to be concerned with supporting me and allowing me to support them. And I think as time goes by, that will grow. Thank you, Natalie, for your donation. And it's such a shame. It's such a disaster that we're in a point in human society and human relationships where there's really not any opportunity to sit down and talk about deep things that are really meaningful to us. So we have to establish ourselves in these kind of declarative statements that aren't backed up by our own experience. And it just closes off the entire world. You know, we close off the entire world in a declarative statement. And we're making those declarative statements again and again and again in the way that we live our lives, in the way that we think, in the way that we see others. And I want to, in my own path, work on not relying on those declarative statements so much anymore. Like, it's definitely like this, it's definitely like that. I don't know if it is. It might seem that way at that time, but time is not eternal. The paradox of that squeeze lift is that the more rest you take, the more rest you need. The more food you eat, the more food you need. Someone who doesn't eat much food doesn't need much food. Someone who doesn't take much rest doesn't need much rest. Someone who has a lot of money doesn't need much money, doesn't need any money. It's kind of the backwardsness of the world. That if you have a lot of money, well, the world is going to pay you to have more money. And then we think, well, how can I get in on that? I'm a good person. I can use it in a good way. How could I get in on that? And then you miss out on the fullness of this instead of being a fool. And this is definitely, if anything, a gathering place for fools. Not sticking to absolutes, just listening, letting the unfolding and the unraveling take place. It's not about being in the same position or doing things the same way that someone else does them. If you can listen then you'll be able to do it better. It's a really big problem because, like I said, we keep closing the door on the unknown. So I've got to think about that myself, or digest a little bit of that, and how to not close the door to the unknown. We just say life is like this, or life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, sometimes you might know what you're going to get. And certainly that's how we operate in our lives anyway. Most of the time, you order a cheeseburger, you better get a cheeseburger. How to not practice not making declarative statements, to not practice creating absolutes. Remember, traditionally it would be it'd be the elders that would speak in absolutes. They'd make declarations from their 60, 70, 80 years of lived experience, and they say, well, it's like this. But somehow we've turned into these people that have lost our elders, lost our community, lost access to deep, rich, meaningful experiences in our lives that help us grow and develop and deepen. And yet we're more than ever just swallowed whole by our tendency to fixate and become rigid in these declarative statements. Donald Trump is like this, the left is like that, my life is like this. And it makes it impossible to have a conversation with anyone. At least a deep conversation that's not just about politics or business. And this desire to be believed. this desire to be agreed with, this desire for people to leave a like on our comment, to hear those words, I agree with you, you're right, I agree with you. But even if the whole world agreed with us, then what? Kind of like going to someone else's house and saying this carpet isn't quite right. Or this house is this way, this house is that way. Maybe it's better to be a little bit less sure, a little bit more open, in a sense of wonder and awe and mystery. And thank you, Natalie, for that donation. And not getting lost into semantics. Semantics have so little to do with human communication and connection. So it's like I see sluggy and harvesting now. Like there's good and evil and complacency. You must choose God. God is good. And Sluggy says there's no evil. Opposite of good is bad. Yeah, but when it comes down to it, do we even know who we're talking to? Do we even know why we're saying what we're saying? It's like that idea that words can be violent. But is that violence based in the words? Or is it based in that underlying anger and rejection and fear and frustration? The words themselves, I mean, they don't mean anything. You might as well call ChatGPT and ask them to turn your brain into a large language model. Two large language models talking to each other. What's the point? It doesn't go anywhere. For someone to listen to you, you have to have a relationship with someone. You have to be willing to build a relationship. And, now in the age of TikTok, we're just trying to get likes. We're just trying to get people to say, yeah, you're right. So it doesn't really lead anywhere. So we can't say that sluggy is more right or harvesting now is more right. I think that all we can say is that those are words. Those are definitely words. We may also be able to say, I don't know who you are. And I don't think you know me. So why should I listen to you? And then we've kind of made ourselves into a crazy person because we're talking to words on a screen saying, why should I listen to you? Now you're just having conversation with words on a screen. So it's much, I have found in terms of community building, it's much more helpful to share our experience and not try to teach other people, not try to make like declarations to the audience, because it's not our place to do that. we haven't been given the consent by the others in the community for you to be in that position. And maybe that's a bitter pill for our ego to swallow. I kind of get away with it a little bit because this is my YouTube channel where I share my thoughts and my experiences and do a little bit of teaching. But I'm not someone who's just going to listen to anybody, you know what I mean? Even if I can see and hear that person and maybe know about some of their background of experience, I'm not just going to sit there and listen to them and kind of, yeah, I agree. And I also am not going to get worked up by disagreeing with them, because I have to ask myself, what position am I actually giving this person in my life, first and foremost? And this addiction to making declarative statements, it's like an addiction for this want to be a leader in a community. And being a leader doesn't work like that. I remember I first went to live at the meditation center when I was 20, and I lived there for a year, a Zen Buddhist meditation center. And I remember in one of the practice interviews with the teacher Joshin, he was kind of asking me, like, what do you do? What do you want to do with your life? What's your idea? What's your plan? And I said, I want to be a spiritual teacher. And he looked at me right in the eyes and he said, it doesn't work that way. You kind of have to earn that position of social responsibility. It's not given to you. You can't just magically pretend to yourself into being important in an environment. You have to develop yourself or cultivate yourself and that self's relationship with others for your words to then have import. And I find that nowadays we're just kind of LARPing, we're kind of role playing ourselves into these positions of authority and relevance over other people's minds and lives, and over our own mind and life as well. Yeah, and I don't take unsolicited advice, and I don't take advice from anonymous people. I don't know, maybe it's a little bit something weird about me, but I couldn't give two fucks who Eric Dubé is or anything like that, because I don't know who you are. I've never heard your voice. I've never seen your face. I don't know what your energy is like. I'm not trying to tell people, hey, come here and listen to me. I was a monk for 7 years. I'm a spiritual teacher. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, come here if you like and listen and share. But don't ever come here and try to tell other people what to do, you fucking retard. I mean, come on, what are we doing here, everybody? Let's kind of get a little bit associated with something practical and grounded and human. They say, well, what about when the artificial general intelligence of the AI, starts to take over? I think it might have already taken over, this kind of artificial intelligence, this artificial social position. And I'm very against that. And I found that even when I was a monk and leading meditations every day and working with large groups of people, there was an artificiality to it. And a lot of my work that I do, like the artwork that I do, is to say, I'm not here to be artificial, and I'm not here to convince anybody that I'm some kind of, spiritual being. I'm fucked up. This self is fucked up. And my work and my life is The Way of Unfucking. Maybe that would be my course, or that would be my book title, The Way of Unfucking. So this is kind of my specialty, and this is what I'm focusing on right now, and continuing to do that. I just had a spirit reach out to me, and it said, "Oh, this is your specialty, just sitting there and talking shit." Well, that's one way to see it, you know, but maybe someone else doesn't see that way. And hey, excuse me, maybe I wouldn't explain it that way. Maybe I wouldn't say it that way. And giving people the right, when they're vulnerable, when they're open, when they're giving, you know, to self-direct and to self-declare is really, really important in community. It's kind of the general basis for community and for relationships. And I got into it with Shiva. Um, some people probably saw that or heard about it, as my friend, spiritual friend Shiva, about how he was acting with, kind of just more energy coming into his space, and people joining his community calls and things like that. And I had to draw a hard line because I can't be involved. The more energy, the more people you have coming in, the more responsibility you have. And it also came down to it when that person reached out and was like, my father passed away, and I've gotten this very large inheritance, and I'd like to send you $200,000. And we can say, oh yeah, I could lead a community. I can manage a lot of money. I can make sure that everything happens in a good way. But once that wealth comes in, more responsibility comes in. Once more people are looking to you and being vulnerable with you and practicing generosity with you, more responsibility and the heaviness of that comes in, and the ego just co-opts that. So it takes a real affinity, a real connection to the problemness of power, to use power skillfully. And it's kind of a funny thing, because I don't know if that person was pulling my leg, or they thought a little bit more about it, and they said, hey, it's not a good idea to send this guy $200,000 in Bitcoin. I don't know. But, that's a drop in the bucket in terms of this work, and the possibilities of this work. And I can say that because I don't just take refuge in myself or rely on myself. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of awareness and the community of need as well. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's been an interesting life. Maybe one day I'll write a biography, but hopefully still a lot of life to live and a lot of good to do and a lot of payback. Paying back for my wrong actions and my unskillfulness. And I love it. I love doing that work and that art and the craziness and the wildness and the being seemingly borderline psychotic, and then just being able to come here in the same kind of general space and express awareness, and to be as awareness and to have faith in awareness, um, that doesn't follow thoughts, that doesn't follow ideas. And this kind of personal exposition is just a means for people to get some sense of footing and some sense of grounding in the apparent interpersonality of what's taking place here. Because if you're just doing something as a YouTube creator or a course seller or teaching meditation, then that's really not needed. But in terms of building a new spiritual community or a progressive spiritual community, we have to be very open with ourselves as we are now and kind of giving people something to work with. And that mostly has to do with vulnerability, being willing to be vulnerable and to share your experience. And that experience can be very vividly out of the box and incomprehensible. You think seeing me put black paint on my face and wearing a wig and yelling at the screen is crazy. Wait till you hear a Myanmar nun speaking for 3 hours straight in Burmese, at midnight to 3 a.m. after a full day of meditating and traveling. So, talk about not understandable. Talk about unfathomable. And remember, don't try to be the teacher. Don't try to be the leader. It's not what spirituality is about. Don't go around giving unsolicited advice. Because our declarative statements are superfluous for ourselves. The way that it is for you is already the way that it is for you. And if you can start to take responsibility that the way that it is for you is just the way that it is for you, then you can start to actually give instead of making this all about yourself and making up these imaginary situations where it would make sense for you to give advice to me. Although, thank you for the sentiment, trying to help me out. But the the kind of messed up thing about what you're saying is that is just an illusion. Being not in karmic debt is just as much an illusion as not being in karmic debt. These are all hallucinatory appearances. So I really encourage people, calm down a little bit, step back a little bit and listen. I didn't just crawl out of the mud and show up here. This is a culmination of a lot of work and a lot of self-sacrifice and a lot of surrender. It's not all about you and your understanding. The best thing that we can do here is to be very willing to detach from our own understanding. So then maybe we can have the opportunity to learn. And if you're not here to learn or to give, maybe you're not really here. I was speaking of speaking poorly. I was with one of my masters, Puha Sunim, a South Korean Zen master monk, and we were at his hermitage outside of Seoul. It's up on the mountains, heavy place, and he was having an event for some of his supporters. We were all having tea together, and he was asking some, koan questions and kind of teaching. And at a certain point, I began challenging him. I said, "Your question is just an illusion. You're attached to asking that question. You're attached to, teaching in a certain way. And I'm not attached to it," what I was saying. And we were kind of looking right at each other, and he was raising up and matching my energy, and he was making tea for the group. And at a certain point, out of nowhere, and while I was doing that, I'm not attached, all is an illusion, he quickly picked up the teapot and pretended like he was going to throw it at my face. And of course, what did I do? But as Westerners, Westerners who are interested in spirituality, we're oftentimes not putting ourselves in those situations where we can actually have our declarative statements and our kind of self-given attainments checked. And that means that our path of spirituality becomes a path of disassociation and belief in words and phrases. Which is kind of impossible to deepen that, just maybe deeper words and deeper phrases, but that's not the point. I'm not going to be able to meet you there, Tyler, but hopefully I can meet you somewhere close. Going to college, going to a university, event. It doesn't need to be called a class. So the university professor is sitting up front, many people in the audience, everybody's watching and listening. People are asking questions, and teachers asking questions, people are giving answers. And one of the students raises their hands and says, "If our questions and answers are all illusion, why do we have them? Wouldn't it be pointless and meaningless? I just don't think that's the truth." The person asks their question, puts their hand back down, and the university professor continues teaching. So it's very dangerous to self-teach. If you want a degree, you will most likely have to go to college in person. And not just that, but you're going to want to go to the best college or university lecture that you can. But we can't make the university professor or the class or the college responsible for our interest to be there. We have to take responsibility for our own interest. And, then the student, after the teacher continued teaching, didn't seem to not really answer the question, the student stands up and says to the group, the teacher and all the students, "We are seeking for the ultimate truth and reality behind the illusion of confusion." And then in one analogy, he sits back down and just who knows what he's doing. And in the other analogy, he gets up and walks away. So you can continue what you're doing. You can get up and leave. Or you can realize awareness that has nothing to do with thoughts.
Cái này rù quá thì thẳng mặt ở đây nha. Đó. Cái đây là cái gì? Cái xe đáy là rù tới đây nè, còn em có cái đất phải không? Cái đất luôn thì chiều cao nó ở nào? Chiều cao nó đất nè. Cầm 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 năm cái là So there's a teaching and a pointer here on the problematic nature of relying on appearances and also relying on thoughts to understand. That's starting point. When we go beyond that, when we go deeper than that, now we can talk about the understanding of not understanding. But unless you know how to not understand, you will never be able to understand anything because you don't even understand not understanding. And so this is not about creating a self that understands squeeze lift. Just like in the gym, the more work that you do, the more capacity you have to do more work. Otherwise, the muscles are just going to shrink. The more wealth you have, the more responsibility you have. Otherwise, the wealth is going to shrink. The more relationship to awareness that you have, the more that you have to give awareness its fair share. Otherwise, that awareness is going to shrink, and the thoughts and understandings and positions are going to propagate. But it's not about you getting it or you understanding it. It's about the absence of you in the immediacy of direct experiencing that is not even about itself. We have to stop role playing as controllers and as understanders. We have to stop. Like showing up to a job site that you don't really have anything to do with, or showing up to a project, an art project, or a community center project, or a building project that you don't really have anything to do with. Nobody really knows who you are. The owner of the job site doesn't know who you are, but you've shown up and began to make declarative statements. There's a kind of untenable ridiculousness in that. And that untenable ridiculousness is kind of relaying a lack of realization or a lack of deepening the relationship just with that awareness that is not about words and phrases at all. It's not about thought forms. It's a humbling process, Tyler. What's on offer here and what's kind of transpiring here is a humbling process. It's not a process of reifying the position that we believe to be in. We believe ourselves to be in. It's not about that. So if I don't know you, be, basically be open to not having a strong position in terms of what's going on here. As much as you know the right thing to say, you're wrong. As much as you believe in what you say, you're wrong. As much as you know what you say is right, you're wrong. So if you're not open to being wrong, you're not open to what's happening here that is free from what's right and what's wrong. It's not that there's no right or wrong. That's also very incorrect. But it's a kind of freedom from what's right and a freedom from what's wrong in awareness. So what I'm, hoping to give to you, Tyler, is an irrelevance, a sense of irrelevance of your thoughts. And remember, we can go back to the analogy before, or we can let it go. So let's all try to let it go. I was a Buddhist monk for 7 years. Anyone who says that they're humble is the opposite of humble. That's kind of like a classic joke, isn't it? So Tyler, you might want to hit the gym a little bit more, hit the meditation cushion a little bit more. Thank you, Cole, for your donation. And hello to the 12 people that are watching this very sincerely. That are watching this very sincerely. I decided to become a monk just as much as I decided to come to this coffee shop and start this live stream. It wasn't I. Shiva is at or headed to the 10-day Vipassana retreat. And Cole, I'll see about unblocking you on the YouTube channel, but you can also just make a new YouTube account and join that way, because it's a little bit difficult to unblock someone from commenting once they've been blocked. So you could just make a new Gmail and then join YouTube through that and restart your algorithm. It's a good thing to do. This channel is about Buddhism and meditation and spirituality and art. Uh, 2 weeks. Street meets mom. 2 weeks. Yeah, I'm American. Yeah. So it's very problematic, Tyler. So in the most simplest terms, and I know you think this is an ego game that I'm trying to play, um, but it's like you coming to a temple or you coming to a meditation retreat or a meditation talk that's going on. Stay with me. I know this is very difficult to listen to. And then you took up a position of relevance in the meditation hall and said, I'm going to challenge the teacher leading meditation. It's very ridiculous. Actually, you can do that, which is why they say a donkey's clock is right twice a day. But in this situation, it's more like you're calling the phone in the office while the meditation talk is or Dharma talk is going on and challenging the teacher. The teacher's not even there. So there's something very practical and kind of grounded about this energetically that's not based in the thoughts that we make up about what this is. You have to sacrifice a lot. You have to sacrifice a lot more than what makes sense. And you have to go into a state and a way of senselessness. And until we do that, our mind is just going to be constantly playing tricks on us. So, like the donkey's clock being right twice a day is true. You know, no one talking to no one, is true in a very real sense. But here, the pointer is to sit your dumb ass down, donkey fuck, and eat the carrot, not keep yee-hawing and pretending that you're involved in what's going on in some meaningful way, or that you know me, or that you have this deep understanding. It's a kind of taking a trip to Pretendville and then looking around and smiling at everyone that is your imagination of them. It's very, kind of ridiculous. I'm not saying it's not true or that anything can't be true. Anything can be true. So, like in terms of the unreality of anything, the unreality of anything is just another thing that is unreal. So, you have to be very practical just as much as you are realizing the impracticality of being practical as a self or as an identity. It so there's nothing here about being better than someone or something. This has nothing to do with me being better than you. But your lack of taking responsibility for listening to me is what's making you basically act like a donkey fuck yee-hawing nonsense. So it's like going to a meditation center while a meditation retreat is going on and thinking that that has something to do with you. Yeah, kind of it's kind of like a self-brainwashing. And what we're learning to do here and practice here is a kind of release from the belief in thoughts that appear. And here is not some kind of amorphous, vague, generalistic space. It's built on a kind of clarity of awareness that's not based on thoughts. And please do consider to, if you like, to support this work or be more involved. Uh, we do accept donations here at the Monk Life Meditation Institute, fully run by donations. So if you like to support, you're welcome to do so. It's like thinking that cleaning someone's dishes means that they're better than you, or that the only reason you would clean someone's dishes if they were better than you. Yeah, that's a nice thing to say. But I'm not portraying myself as a teacher. I'm being portrayed as a teacher by Tyler Witzke, who's self-admitted. Good luck, Shiva Kailash Shambho, in your Vipassana retreat. And, what I'm trying to convey to you in so many words, Tyler, is that your temple is a donkey sitting in a room hee-hawing at the wall. And the difference between me and you is that I realize that while you don't.
Oh, that's quite nice, Wib Gloria. Thank you for sharing. And also, there's no absolute rules about coming in and making declarations because, regardless of if your mind is subtle or not or deep or not, that offering may have a practical relevance in that environment. Yeah. And Tyler, the teaching that I'm trying to convey to you is a teaching of principles and practices, not inter-ego nonsense. And we're able to work with principles and practices when we also let go of the notion of equality. So someone thinking that they're equal to me is very stupid. It's like thinking that you're equal to what goes on in someone else's house, or that your opinion about someone's carpet at their house is as relevant as that person's opinion about their carpet at their house. But this is not a house, this is a meditation center. So we're not concerned with carpets, we're concerned with the truth, not interego babbling. So once you start to digest that you will never be equal to me, is when you'll actually be able to start hearing what I'm saying. Any Mel Gibson fans in here? I watched one of my favorites, What Women Want, with Mel Gibson. I don't know if anybody has seen that movie, but it's a real a masterclass on character pieces, and Mel Gibson is so good at that. Was so good at that. Vietnam is a country where there's a very high knowledge of Buddha. Is actually something that came up recently, and there's also a great there's a great opportunity for investment here because Vietnam is on track to become the next Japan, the next South Korea. They're on a pathway of very quick economic development. It's a very safe place. Maybe quite a bit easier to get a visa in a place like Thailand for the long term. But if you can swing it, there's a lot of really lovely potential here in Vietnam, I feel, economically and socially as well. Very good energy here. And the kind of raid that's going on in a place like Thailand is not really happening in Vietnam. Although I was looking at Airbnbs, and I found a gay Airbnb hostel. It's men only, clothing optional. I might go back and onto the app and report it because that's not really appropriate in Vietnam. Um, but run by some Western guy.
hot tub on the roof. So not my kind of thing, and really vile and disgusting from my perspective. Um, because of the probably the emphasis on lust. Uh, and there's in Thailand, I don't know what has kind of made that all happen, but I think it's the lack of the Buddhism background is there, but there's a lack of social, economic, cultural structure that's not based in Buddhism that maybe leaves a lot of leeway for the prostitution, a lot of the raids of the Western people, the tourists and things that Vietnam doesn't really have because of the backing from China culturally. Just nonsense, but that's much better, Tyler. The nudity part and probably the emphasis of what's going on there. In itself, with the gay and the nude, in itself, maybe not anything wrong, but I don't like spaces that are exclusionary to children or primarily about lust or sexual orientation in any way. So I would also disagree or think it was quite vile if it was a swingers Airbnb or a swingers hotel in a place like Vietnam, because they don't really go for those kinds of things here. Uh, Probably gross and problematic most of the time. Yeah, gross and problematic and inappropriate. Because we can't pretend that we're not a part of the culture that we're a part of. There's cultures in Africa and in different places of the world where nudity is normalized and not sexualized, but in the West, we come from a culture where nudity is deeply sexualized. And especially some of these, they do like nude beaches at places in Thailand that they can find to make it happen. And yeah, the vague intentions, surely. And that's not appropriate culturally, so it's a form of colonizing and exploitation and disrespect. This is very legit Buddhism. Buddhism and meditation. Okay, we'll have some space for quinal questions, and sharing, and then we'll bring our live stream for today here to an end. Final questions and sharing. Well, what you'll find is that the intellect or thoughts are entirely irrelevant in terms of controlling or managing or understanding in the deeper mind. And thoughts, as we know them, are more like expressions of fixation on memory. And we've been trained to think in a certain way. We've been trained to use certain words. So, really, there's no good question that a carpenter's apprentice can ask a master carpenter besides where to hit the hammer on the nail. And that's really tough for people's egos to take, especially when they're deeply disassociated, when they've been consuming a lot of misanthropic spiritual content that has led them to believe that they have a high understanding or a high position. That's been totally untested by going to a meditation retreat, by interacting deeply with any spiritual teachers. So, what I have to say to you, Tyler, hee haw, hee haw, hee haw. I hope that answers your question. You may want to look into what is Zen, what is Chan Buddhism, and maybe even visit a meditation center or a monastery, attend a meditation retreat. Sorry, Tyler, I misspoke. Uh, Actually, hitting the nail is a little bit higher end. Where to put the shovel and how deep to dig the hole. Tyler, do I have permission to mock you a little bit? Would it be okay if I mocked you a little bit, Tyler? Hootin', hollerin', what do you say? $15 an hour, I'll give it a day. Master Carpenter, dear friend, I'm happy to be here. What do you say? Dig that hole? All right, hooray! But I got a question for you. What are we building today? Shut your fucking mouth, donkey fuck. Get your hands on the shovel and dig, dig, dig. Don't be a cuck. But I've got something to say, and I've got questions to ask. What are we doing? And what's really about this building today? Shut your fucking mouth, or you won't get your pay. Dig that hole. Hip, hip, hooray! It's very weird, cataclysmic death ray. And it's only when we are very disassociated. And when I say disassociated, what I mean is that there, even in terms of physical endurance, like a human being can literally chase down a gazelle until that gazelle is exhausted from running. A human being can outrun a gazelle. And in terms of the mind, does it really need to be said?
We have, this is the most advanced intellect and mind that any being on the planet has ever had, right? So if you are primarily consuming content, watching YouTube videos, watching TikTok videos, doing mindless work, drinking, socializing in very shallow ways, your mind is going to be deeply disassociated. So some of the experiences that I've had of attending intensive meditation retreats, being a Buddhist monk for 7 years, living in community, allow me to speak a little bit about these teachings and these practices from more of an embodied perspective rather than a very disassociated kind of, what's the next video? Come on, buddy. So it's a little bit difficult. Well, I know that I'm not saying Wib Gloria, sorry, cataclysmic. I'm not saying that you've had that experience of being a monk or training seriously in meditation or studying with meditation masters. I'm saying that this is what that channel is. This is what this channel is about. And it's my responsibility to keep it oriented towards the teachings and the practices, etc. And rape is very enjoyable. So, these positions that people create about, but I enjoy it, is what's destroying this planet Earth and what has destroyed relationships between men and women and human beings and animals for eons. Well, it would be around 50-50, wouldn't it be, Wib Gloria? People rape because it's very pleasurable and enjoyable. So having as a fundamental principle that something is enjoyable is deeply, deeply problematic. Very, very problematic. Same principle. The principle that you were trying to convey, Wib Gloria, of, so, but what if people enjoy it? So people enjoying something doesn't mean anything skillful or good. We can't operate from the perspective of, if I enjoy it, it's good. If it's pleasurable, it's good. It's a very, very bad perspective. Says the fly on the wall. Bzzz. Oh, of course, it's a very horrible thing. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. Om 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 Mani
Magala Yakshabe Dale Umza Om Shri 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 Magala Yakshabe Om Shri Magala Yakshabe Dale Umza 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 Om Shri Magala Yakshabe Dale Umza